Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar tonight with Dr. Saltiel. Tonight we're going to share a unique perspective about the fellowship and the board certification by a doctor who has completed it. Dr. Saltiel will share why the fellowship was a necessity for her to change her practice. She will share her learning experience and how the fellowship changed her life, her business, and most importantly, her patients' lives. I'm so excited to have Dr. Saltiel with us tonight. Dr. Doreen Saltiel completed a cardiology fellowship and board certification and practiced interventional cardiology for more than 20 years. Additionally, she is board certified in phlebotomy and a registered physician in vascular interpretation. Dr. Saltiel completed the advanced fellowship training in metabolic and nutritional medicine from the Metabolic Medical Institute and is a diplomate in the American Board of Anti-Aging and Regenerative Medicine. She has completed MMI's advanced certification in cardiovascular health and is currently enrolled in the University of South Florida's master's program in metabolic and nutritional medicine and USF's cardiovascular advanced certification. Due to the high attendance this evening, please use your chat option to submit your questions, and we will open up the floor for questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much, Dr. Saltiel. I'm going to turn the webinar over to you. But before we get started, Dr. Saltiel, if you can briefly outline the details of the fellowship.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. The fellowship consists of 8 modules. You don't have to do the modules sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. However, it certainly helps to decide where you want to focus your practice and sort of start there. It is important to do all 8 of the modules such that you can really get a good understanding and handle on how to take care of complex patients using an integrative approach.
Thank you, Dr. Saltiel. Now, Dr. Saltiel, what did your practice look like prior to taking the fellowship?
Well, as you stated, I practiced interventional cardiology for over 20 years, and then as more and more individuals were presenting with vein disease, I then had a very active vein practice, which consisted initially of inpatients and outpatients taking care of acute DVTs and PEs, and then basically converting that to an outpatient practice. During that time, I was training physicians to do endovenous laser ablation, and one of the individuals I was training, it was purely a traditional practice whereby I gave patients traditional medicines, and in the venous world, it was basically compression therapy, exercise, and then, because it's a mechanical problem, correcting the underlying issues. I didn't use omega-3 fatty acids, knowing that those are anti-inflammatories. I did use statins on open wounds, but I didn't use ginkgo or any of those other nutraceuticals that certainly would have been an addition to the armamentarium. When I was treating patients, I never even thought about using anything of that nature.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Saltiel, why did you start the fellowship in metabolic and nutritional medicine?
Well, this is where I was going previously when I was training a physician who is currently an OBGYN in the Woodlands in Texas. He and I became friends, and we were just chatting about the fact that I wanted to lose weight, and I couldn't lose weight, and my joints ached, and he said, you need hormones. And I said, I'm not doing no hormones because of the Women's Health Initiative and all of those sorts of things. And he said, come to my office in the Woodlands, and we'll talk about hormones, and I'll put pellets in you. And I had no idea what he was talking about. So I said, nope. And he said, here, let me send you the literature. I read all the literature, and so I went down and I got pellets put in. And basically I felt 2,000 times better. He said, you can do this. If you can open up coronary arteries and take care of heart attacks, you can put pellets in somebody's bottom. And it was at that point that I started looking at what he really was talking about, which is something I hadn't done in 25 years. I hadn't done hormones. I hadn't done any of that stuff. I was a belly button up doctor. I was a cardiologist. And so I was fooling around one night on the computer and watching The Good Wife, and I Googled bioidentical hormones, and A4M came up, and I looked at the website and listened to the little clip that Pan had made on Dr. Smith had made on functional medicine. At the same time, Danielle was on the computer, and she started chatting with me. And then the next day, she and I talked for a very long time, and I talked with Dr. Smith afterwards, and that was it. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this the right way and do the fellowship. And I decided that because it's very easy to just do hormones, as lots of people do. Getting into trouble is the easy part. What separates the average from the excellent is being able to figure out how, number one, not to get in trouble, and number two, if you get in trouble, which everybody's going to do at some point in their career, something's not going to be perfect, you know how to get out of it. And that, for me, was key, is not just sticking pellets in people's bottoms, but understanding hormone therapy. And then as I got more and more involved, knowing the gut and the heart was just a natural, and just understanding how they all interrelate.
Dr. Saltiel, can you explain the process of the fellowship? Did you attend live courses or did you do modules online? Can you share your experience with our listeners?
Sure, I did a combination of both. I did Module 1 online and Module 2 online, and then I did some of the others live, and I realized how much I enjoyed the live events, more so because you got to meet other people, share experiences, and just the interaction with the people who are teaching just was phenomenal, and it was energizing. And then when I didn't have the option because of work commitments, I did other ones online, and so I went back and forth. Now, depending on the module, depending on the difficulty and the content of the module, I do some online and I do some live. So it just depends on what module it is now. But I love going to the live events. They're so much fun.
Thank you. And Dr. Saltiel, can you explain to us how your practice changed and how you are treating patients differently compared to before the fellowship?
Well, sure. As I was doing the fellowship, my vein practice changed dramatically. People started getting omega-3 fatty acids. I started looking for inflammation. I started looking for why these individuals had vein disease as well as arterial disease. I didn't just treat hypertension. I started looking for the cause of why people had hypertension. I looked at cortisol levels, none of which I did before, and advanced lipid profiles. And over time, I actually don't do primarily vein disease or cardiovascular disease anymore. I basically do functional medicine with a focus on cardiovascular wellness. And what that really means is looking at the gut, looking at neurotransmitters, most importantly, finding why they're inflamed, because coronary disease as an inflammatory disease. Previously, when I did cardiology, especially interventional cardiology, everybody got ACEs, betas, statins, aspirin, and Plavix. Now I treat things very, very differently.
Great. Dr. Saltiel, why would you encourage someone to take the fellowship?
Medicine is changing. We can all talk about, and this is not a political statement, but our healthcare system is not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. And I think more baby boomers, of which a good portion of us are, and millenniums, the younger, of which you are, Lindsay, want to stay young and healthy and not wait for disease or illness to set in. And I think this is the future of healthcare, is finding out the whys before there's an end organ that's damaged. Whether it be hypertension, whether it be insulin resistance, whether it be cortisol issues, whether it be becoming postmenopausal and having cognitive issues, it's now is the time to stay healthy. And I think that this, finding out the whys, learning how to fix the whys, is the key to keeping patients healthy and happy. And I have patients walk in every single day and say to me, I haven't felt this good in 3 years. I haven't felt this good in 5 years. I feel better than I did when I started, but I really would like to feel better. And it's such a, it's like putting the puzzle together. It's rewarding, it's challenging, it's not fighting with insurance companies, it's just you and the patient, which is just, this is why we all became doctors.
Thank you, Dr. Saltiel. Can you give us an example of a patient case where something you learned in the fellowship really helped you transform that patient?
Oh, sure. I can give you lots of them, but one patient I saw recently came to me because her regular doctor told her her lipids were abnormal and they wanted to put her on a statin. And she heard all these horrible things about statins and she didn't want to be put on a statin. So we chatted. And I spend an hour and a half with a new patient. And I figured out in that hour and a half that her issue was she probably had sleep apnea and she had food intolerances. And so we sent her off for a sleep study, did some baseline labs, and lo and behold, she had sleep apnea, and she was sensitive to a number of foods, of which we didn't test. I didn't do allergy testing. I just did an elimination diet. And 3 months later, she's sleeping like a baby, and her lipid markers are better. Just with omega-3 fatty acids, just some basic fish oil, probiotics, changing her diet, and getting her to sleep. No hormones. She didn't need hormones. We weren't at that point yet.
Thank you, Dr. Saltiel. I wanted to open up the floor to anyone who has a question about the fellowship, about board certification, about how to get started, or specific questions for Dr. Saltiel. So please use your chat option, and I'd be more than happy to ask Dr. Saltiel. But while we're waiting for questions, Dr. Saltiel, is there anything that you would like to comment on, share your experience about the fellowship to our listeners?
I think it's a fabulous opportunity to change the direction of your practice and really do things and specialize in an area that you really have an interest in. If your interest is in the gut, then you can really do a lot for a lot of patients, just as Jill Carnahan has done and has grown her practice from an internal medicine practice or a family practice to a booming gut health practice, which involves the immune system, detoxification, or somebody like me who's now basically doing preventive cardiology, which involves the gut neurotransmitters as much as anything else, to just doing hormones plus. I mean, you can really choose what you want to do with the information that you learn. And it's not hard. It's fun.
Great. Dr. Saltiel, we have a question. When you first transitioned from more of a traditional background into a more integrative anti-aging approach, how did you market this to your patients?
Okay. Firstly, I set up a separate LLC because I wasn't going to take insurance in this portion of the practice. The other portion of that, which we can do on a separate webinar, is if you're contracted with government agencies, if you choose not to in the new practice, you still have to take those government agency insurances because those numbers follow you wherever you go. But what I did is I did it patient by patient. I had a captive audience when I was doing venous procedures, and basically just started talking to them. And I basically have done every test that I ask any patient to do. So I started talking to them about it. When I got hormones, all the patients said, "Doc, how are you with the hormones?" And my office staff said, "She's much nicer, much happier." So then they were like, "Well, can I do that?" Yes. For patients just in general, I just started talking to them about their gut, or I started talking to them about antioxidants. And if they wanted to spend more time with me and get to root causes of what's going on, then we can set up an appointment to, have that discussion. And so patients did, one by one by one.
Thank you. That leads us to the next question about marketing. How did you market to get new patients other than word of mouth?
I actually went and spoke in front of groups. I went to, for example, a lot of the OBGYNs, if you're interested in hormones, don't like to fuss with hormones. And so I went and talked to them about doing bioidentical hormones. I went and talked to the primary care doctors. And then I went and talked to patients, potential patients. I talked to my local compounding pharmacy and asked him if I could sponsor an evening little chat. I just went and presented myself at opportunities at health fairs and asked to speak. Now, some of this costs some money. Depending on where you live, the price will vary. I sat on panel discussions at women's health fairs, at just work health fairs. I went into when they were holding wellness sessions. I went and talked to groups. I went to my local banker and said, do you guys ever have, a meeting where I can take 10 minutes and just come in and talk about wellness, keeping your employees well? And so I did those sorts of things.
Dr. Saltiel, how did you start to build your therapeutic toolbox? How did you know which labs to use, which nutraceuticals, which compounding pharmacies? How did you navigate through that process?
Well, as far as, let's start with the easy one, compounding pharmacies. When you go to these events, there are a number of compounding pharmacies that are there and that you can talk to about what they offer if you want to do it on a quote-unquote national level. If you know of a compounding pharmacy in your area, some of them are better well known than others. Then go in and talk to them. Talk about their pricing. Talk about their lab. And the most important thing is how quickly they respond to prescriptions for patients and respond to you. So what I did is there was a local health fair here, some women's health thing a bunch of years ago, and one of the big compounding pharmacies in this area, if you can imagine, in Fort Smith, Arkansas, there is a big one, but in Northwest Arkansas, Collier's compounding pharmacy, which it's local, it was locally owned, they were there, and I met the pharmacist, who's a PharmD, and he and I just started chatting. I asked him if he would be willing to go to the compounding module, and he sent his people, and all he does is compounding. And he and I developed a very nice relationship. I call him, we make little mixes together, we put vitamins together, I do Cialis with arginine troches with him. And so you have to find, number one, somebody you trust. A lot of people use a number of different pharmacies. I don't because I like this guy. He responds to me. He takes care of the patients for me. So I was very lucky. And in fact, he even was willing to be an intermediary for their nutraceuticals. So he signed on with Designs for Health, Orthomolecular, Metagenics, Zymogen, all of them for me. And so I send them a list. I send him the list, and he just fills it for them. I make no money on it, so you can go through Emerson as an intermediary and make some money, but then you have to deal with all the tax things and all of that. So I found him to do that. Now, I will tell you there are a number of very good pharmacies. Central Drugs does a lot of good work with glutathione and the IV drip mixes. They're out of California. And Sahar, Swedan's pharmacy, Sahar is always available to answer questions. Her pharmacy does very well, except people complain about the callbacks to the patients and all of those sorts of things. So really finding your own pharmacy for what you're going to do, and I interviewed a bunch of the compounding pharmacies here before I found this guy where he and I clicked. I can call him anytime. As far as labs, the basic labs, you could either go through LabCorp, Quest, or whomever you want.
Right.
I basically did Quest because in my area, Quest was easier for patients to get to. So for me, that was the lab I used. And I developed panels that I put together with my Quest rep so that, those panels for patients who wanted to just pay me because they had a huge deductible, we worked through. For the advanced lipid profile, all of them are very good. You can use Boston Heart, which has a lot of the genetics on there and has a lot of the inflammatory markers. You can get you can't get a CBC, but you can get a chemistry. You can get blood hormones if you wanted to. But, you know, I like Quest's advanced, you know, which used to be Berkeley, their advanced lipid profile. And so my person got me a, you know, a pricing for it, and so I use them. But some specialty labs you can't get. Most of my specialty labs I get through Genova, except I use the 3 labs I tend to use. Specialty labs are Genova, Neuroscience, and ZRT.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Saltiel. We would like to know a little bit how, you know, why a pharmacist would benefit from the fellowships, nurses, PAs, RDs. How does this fit into other practices and other medical specialties outside of a physician's perspective?
Oh, I think that every pharmacist who compounds should go through this fellowship. If they're going to call themselves, and that's a very strong statement, if they're going to call themselves a compounding pharmacist, they need to go through this fellowship because they will learn more about metabolism, compounding things, and coming up with new innovative ways to grow their own practice. And working with integrative physicians other than pediatricians and veterinarians, which is a good portion of what pharmacists, compounding pharmacists do. Knowing about hormones and all these vitamins and how to intermix them and ratios to put together, I mean, you'll learn nowhere else like you'll learn in this fellowship. Nurses, PAs, nurse practitioners, depending on what your specialty is and what you want to do. Most people want to do that I've come into contact with want to do either weight management or hormones, or a lot of them want to do nutrition stuff. Fabulous. You will learn all about weight loss. With that, I don't think limiting yourself to the 4 weight loss modules is enough. You really have to learn how the brain really is a part of that, and how sleep is so important, and how hormones are important, and the balance of all of those things. And if you don't have gut health, you're never going to lose weight. So I think that it'll just, nurses, PAs, nurse practitioners all want to get people healthy. We all do. And it is geared, it is not over anybody's head. Anybody can sit in any of those lectures and understand how to take 3, 4, 5 things just instantly back to their practice on a day-to-day basis. So I think my nurses all go through this. My nurse practitioner went through this. And in fact, you can do advanced certification in lifestyle coaching, and then you can go and do the weight loss modules. I think doing it without the fellowship, it's like building a house without the slab. It just limits what you can do.
Thank you, Dr. Saltiel. If anyone has any questions, please continue to submit them. We will address them by email. Just to end on a note, you know, Dr. Saltiel, if you can just share how this fellowship has personally changed your life, the way that you practice medicine.
Oh, I'm a very different person today than I was 30 years ago. I mean, I never thought I would do anything other than take care of heart attacks. And I'm the furthest from that. It just changed my whole perspective on taking care of patients. And I am a patient. This medicine actually fixed me. And so I am more than happy to tell my story to anybody. But I probably wouldn't be practicing medicine today if it wasn't for functional medicine. And well, I'll just tell you the story. People will say, like, what is she talking about? I'll just tell you the story. I was at a module and I developed non-stop the runs. And I have a family history of colon cancer and came back from the fellowship and I couldn't figure out, it was like one of my first modules. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And so I went to the typical, the traditional gastroenterologist who's a good friend of mine. And he said, I think we need to do another colonoscopy. I just had one 2 years prior because of my family history. And I said, okay. He said, you look terrible. You've lost a bunch of weight. I started off at that time at 115 and I was down to 106. And it wasn't healthy weight loss. I looked like I had cancer. And so I drank the stuff, had the colonoscopy, and he said to me, oh, it's all inflamed in there, but you can eat gluten. Don't worry about it. You can eat all that stuff. And so I was off of gluten for about 6 months before this happened. So I had done module 1 online and I was attending a module when this happened. So I was in my second module and he put me on rifaximin, which is very expensive, and cholesterol to stop the runs. And my test came back. He biopsied me, did an EGD and all of that stuff. My test came back as lymphocytic colitis with flattening of the villi, but nothing horrible. And he said, don't worry about it. Probably stress. I said, okay, fine. So I took the medicine like he told me. And when I stopped taking the cholesterol, the runs came back. And so my office said to me, I think you need to call somebody because this is not working. And so I called Pam, Dr. Smith, and I said, or I actually emailed her and said, are you taking new patients? And she said, I will. I told her what happened, and she said, I will see you. And so the first thing Pam did was a gut health test on me, and of course my gut wasn't healthy. And basically she fixed me. It took about 6 months, but she fixed me. And I truly am a product that this stuff works when traditional medicine didn't work. So I am very, very passionate about this, and I take one thing at a time, and my goal is to help one person at a time live their best life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saltillo. We definitely all appreciate your time and your story through the fellowship. If anyone would like more information, please do visit the website, which is www.mmimedicine.com. Please feel free to call your education coordinator, and if you do not have one, please give us a call at 561-910-4960. We are definitely here to answer your questions and support you.
And also, before we hang up, Lindsay, if anybody just wants to ask me any other questions about, integrating this into their practice, Lindsay has my email and my phone number, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saltillo. Again, if anyone does have any questions, please continue to put them on the chat option and we will address them. We want to thank you so much for your time, again, especially you, Dr. Saltillo, and I would like to wish everyone a good night.